Hello my sweet friends and welcome back to my channel. I hope you are all doing well. I hope that you enjoyed a nice holiday if you celebrate the 4th of July. For us, it is double the fun because it is Tech Hubby's birthday. So make sure to take a second and drop him some birthday love in the comments below and I will make sure that he sees those. For today, we're going to work on our flowers to prepare for our Christmas in July series. Now, make sure that you stay tuned to the end of the video because we do have an update on that. But I really want to share with you how I create some of the beautiful flowers I'm going to work with during that series. And I'm going to share with you some tips and tricks on how to give these handmade paper flowers the beautiful detail that you would find in the designer collection ready-made flowers that you would buy in the store. So if that sounds good to you, then stick with me and we'll make it together. So as you know, I have been creating this series for a while now, and I do find it very helpful to prepare many of the elements that I'm going to need in advance. And I needed a way to compartmentalize all of the different elements so that I can keep it organized. And this has evolved over the years from this recycled deli tray, or I should say charcuterie, if I want to be one of the cool kids. Then I was using this drawer organizer from Staples, which was much sturdier and it had a few more compartments to use. And so that was working really well. Now I have evolved into the configuration tray. This is a Tim Holtz configuration tray, and I just painted all of the sections white so that it would be nice and bright and I would be able to see all the different elements I have easily. I did also take out a couple of the compartments just so that I could make this work for the different shapes, the different amounts of flowers that I have. I'll easily be able to work this around and change it according to what I need to store. So the first thing I wanted to share with you is all of the different foliage that I have prepared. And so it is always a nice idea if you plan to layer all of these different elements that you would pick different shades of green or different tones so that when you stack them up, it's a definite layering element. And so I've just cut some beautiful pine branches here. There is holly. There is my traditional leaves that I would normally put on all the cards throughout the year, but I think this is a really nice way to fill in an arrangement. There are some smaller 3-leaf flourishes as well. I have some layered elements here, and I chose 2 different greens again, just so that the layering elements will be more noticeable. There are some smaller but more detailed flourishes here. So I've also taken my Cinch and Go Poinsettia and cut several of the different sizes with this beautiful green color, and that will be nice leaves for the back of the flowers when I create them. There are some rose leaves here in different sizes, and then I put a couple of metallic kind of flourishes here as well. This is nice to tuck into your arrangement. This helps to brighten it up, add a little bit of extra detail, and it really helps to fill in. I will also be adding silver to this as well. I think some of the blues that I'm going to be working with will look nicer with the silver. So for the flowers, I have a variety of different sizes, different colors, and different petal shapes. I have prepared many of these in advance by shaping them and adhering the layers. There are also many that I have just die cut, and that way if I want to further detail these, I can do that before they're assembled. So I'm picking some pointed petals, some rounded petals, different shades of each color if I can, so that when I layer them, I get a nice kind of a full effect. For my filler flowers, I often go with white, and I decided not to shape these because I want to know in advance if I'm going to have a shaped flower, a dimensional flower, or if I just want it to be flat. If I'm making a sweet and simple style card, and I want to be able to mail it in a regular envelope, this is going to be the way I can arrange it to be nice and full. So this is a kind of look over what I'll be pulling from as I work along during the series. I also wanted to share with you how I add some details to these flowers to customize them for the project that I'm working on. And so I have prepared some of these in advance. I will be adding a lot of inking and glitter glue to these, and then different centers, just to create similar but different looks that will work on the projects. So for instance, this leaf is a standard one that I would typically make for all year round, but I wanted to add a little bit of extra detail. And so if I ink them, I can arrive at a nice depth of color and the extra added detail. So you can tell the difference here and see how much nicer it looks when you add this inking. And that was inspired by a lot of the Prima leaf flourishes. They do add that extra bit of detail. So I cut my leaves from a lighter green, and I'm just going to bring in this darker crushed olive distress ink color, and I'll just kind of tap on here and then come only about halfway up my leaf. So I'm getting the full stem and then about half of that leaf. So this is going to add a lot of depth to the tone of this flourish. You want to just take your time and get in there and get a nice covering of that darker green. Next, you want to come in with an orange, and I'm picking the Spice Marmalade Distress ink. I think you could also use Distress Oxide if that is what you have. So I'm just going to focus this orange color right along the edge. And then I will do that for each of the leaves in this flourish. It may take a bit to build up the amount of color that you want there, but just take your time and go around, and this definitely helps these to look more like a ready-made or store-bought leaf, for instance from Prima. And so there is that second ink color. Now the next thing I want to do is bend them in the center. This particular die has a score line, so that's easy to find the center. But if you are using one from your stash that doesn't, that's no trouble. You can just pinch the ends here, and that will help you arrive at a good point to score. So now they have more depth and a little bit of extra dimension because we creased it. And so this is what I want to do for this particular arrangement. I'm also going to bring in some of my stickles. So this one is just Stardust. Any clear stickle will work well. And so I'm just going to bring this in on to the very ends and then pull it down a little bit into the petal. And I would do that all the way around. And then you can see how it added so much nice highlight and detail. So these are the Cinch and Go poinsettias again. I cut them from 2 different shades of blue. I did shape them as well. And then I added the center here, which are the double head stamens in gold from Really Reasonable Ribbon. I'm also going to add some netting and loopy twine bows. So I'm not going to actually glue this together, but I will show you how I lay these out because I want to make sure to see the project that I'm adding this to before I know what angle or if I want to do it straight across. And let's just share with you that one. So I would take my leaves here and then top them with the netting and the loopy twine bow. And of course, if I were doing this for my project, I would actually adhere these sections as I work along so that they don't shift as much. Then I've got my smaller blue flower, one for either side. and then one for the center. So if you were filling a more flat arrangement, this would work great. You could also position this so that it would create that angle that I typically like. So I would leave one side flat and then bring these almost to touching the two smaller flowers, and then position the leaves and the netting going straight up. So now we have a corner arrangement, and you can decide when you know how much space you have to fill on your finished project, how steep that angle can be. You see, you can really move that around quite a lot. So this is just one version. You can also add some additional foliage in the back to create a larger looking arrangement and fill in more space. And so I would just tuck in those larger flourishes and create something like that. So you can continue to build all of your layers as you go along when you know how much space that you have to fill. I'm just going to store my arrangements here in these photo boxes. Now that I know that this will all go together for a finished project, I can keep them organized and stack them up, in that way I know what goes together. So this is another way to help me organize. So for the next flower, I am inspired once again by the finished ready-made flowers that you can find online from the designer collections, which would be like Prima or 49 in Market, all of those really lovely brand name flowers. And I think you can be inspired by them and find supplies in your stash that will help you create a look that is very similar. And so I'm going to go ahead and reach for my Cinch and Go Poinsettia again, and I'm just cutting 2, or in this case 3. I didn't have another one for the example of that. But for this flower, really what I want to do is add that dimension and the depth. And this will also look a little bit more antique-y. Perfect, I think, for some traditional color palette. So actual red and green would be really lovely. And so now I'm switching to my vintage photo. And I'm just going to work along the edges, just like I did for those leaves. And this is going to shade the ends. This is a really good project to work if you put your show on, or you have sports or something that you want to listen to, but you don't need to actually watch it while it's going on. So I have just inked that one, and I prepared one in advance as well. So once again, fold on the score line. There are a lot of different poinsettia dies I have found even on Amazon. So if that's where you want to look for just this basic shape, and even though I'm using them for holidays, I definitely use these all year round because I think it's just a beautiful flower and it's really easy to create. You don't have to get your shaping tools out, and once you layer them up, they have a lot of depth. So now this is a 2-layer, more detailed but still a little bit plain. What I want to do is bring in a cinnamon stickle, and I'm just going to go around the outside, just as I did on the blue flower, but this time that is more of a beautiful bronzy, darker tone. I have prepared these in advance so they would be dry, and you can see that I have cut 2 of the same size and then 1 that is smaller. So I'm just going to go ahead and adhere these now. I think sometimes the larger flowers is easier to punch the center before you add all your layers together. So I'm going to bring in my Crop-A-Dile and use the smaller side. It's easier to get up in there. It is handy to have a little bit more space here so that you can run the stamens through and attach them on the back. So I'll just do these separately. That way I can get into the middle more easily. And then layer these up, attach them. I'm using my tombow. This will set up very quickly and I can continue to work along. And now you can see how beautiful that cinnamon stickle is going around the outside. These definitely remind me of a Frank Garcia style flower. And also keep in mind that all of the cardstock I'm using for these are from Offcut. So I have already used the sheet of cardstock and this was what was remaining. So I feel like this is such a good value to me because I'm not cutting into new paper and I'm using up my scraps. So you see now I have 3 layers on there. And this time I'm going to bring in the double head stamens, but in the fossil color. I could easily have gone with the gold again, but I think it might be just a little too flashy. And I wanted to make sure not to overdo it. Once you get into those stickles, it could be easy to go overboard. I think 6 is a good amount to work with. So I'm just bringing all these together. Then I'll fold it in half and stick that end down in through the hole. And then make sure to have all of that evenly distributed in down there. You can pull these from the back side as well to make sure that they are snug. The next thing I want to do is cut myself a little scrap and then also clip the ends here so that I can separate them. And then I'll hold them flat against the back of the flower. Add my hot glue and then top it with my little scrap. I'll just hold it in place for a second till that glue sets up. Then I can distribute those stamens evenly. And then I'll come back over here and cut that off, the excess, so that it doesn't add extra bulk when you start to make your arrangement. One last element I have for this, remember I mentioned that I was cutting some of those Cinch and Go poinsettias with that pretty green, and I cut the larger size for this so that more of the leaves would show around. And then I also inked that just like I did for the blue flower arrangement. I started with the green and then I finished with that pretty orange, and this will go right here. And this is very similar to all of those beautiful ready-made flowers. I think this just adds so much detail and a lot of depth as well as dimension. So this will be really lovely to make your arrangement with. Okay, for this flower, I'm going to switch to a more rounded petal, and I have cut for each flower 2 of the same shape and size. I've also gone in, you can see the difference now between inking and not inking. You're going to get that beautiful depth of color. I still used that vintage photo, and that worked really well on red just to get a little bit of shading and inking around the edge. So next I want to add that really beautiful large center, and I went to my stash of Dollar Tree flowers, and I have some that have that beautiful very textural center. So what I want to do is I cut it off of the stem, and I'm pulling this other section off that is meant to hold all of the pieces in place. So just pull that off and then pull that out. And you can see that it has a little bit of a stump that would go through the center of these flowers. So what I want to do is go in here right up to the base and just clip that off. So now it has a flat back, and now I can easily adhere that with my hot glue. For this arrangement, rather than having a large focal flower and 2 smaller flowers, I'm going to stack these so that I just have the 2 large flowers. And so I went through that foliage that I shared with you in the beginning, and I pulled a few elements that I wanted to stack up. So I have my layered leaves here, and then I also brought in some of that pretty pine needles, and I always feel like this is a little too big for cards or mini albums, so I'm just going to clip this here and then move that bottom section up a little bit and then just reattach these. And I just think that this is going to fill in the space nicer and be a little bit less leggy, if that makes sense. I want it to be a more compact arrangement. I've also got my filler, and you know I like my twine and my netting. So I've brought down this little scrap of a Dollar Tree placemat so that I can glue onto it. And then I've got my rectangle of netting, and I get this from the Dollar Tree, and sometimes I get it off of Amazon. It's just a roll of tulle, and you can get this in pretty much any shade that you like. I tend to stick with silver and gold, mostly for the holiday projects, but if you clip off a strip, you'll wind up with rectangles. And so what I want to do is offset my corners. You see here and here, I'm going to bring this corner over to the middle so that all of the points are going up. And then I'll hold it in the middle and bring in the sides. So what I'm doing is I'm not creating a big bulky end. I'm just getting the points at the top. So now I can just stick this down on my mat. If you need to wear a silicone fingertip to prevent yourself from getting burned, you should probably do that. I don't know that the hot glue bothers me anymore, but if you're sensitive to that, make sure that you take care when using the hot glue. So here's my loopy twine bow. I'm folding that in half because I want to make sure to place all these loops right where I want them. A little more hot glue on there, and then I'll just shape these before that glue sets up and remove the excess twine. This is Ivory burlap string from Really Reasonable Ribbon. And as you can see, I have pretty much gone through this roll, and I have another backup roll to start whenever I work on the projects. So now I can easily peel this portion off, and I can begin to create my arrangements. So what I want to do is work on the leaves first, and I always make my flower arrangements off project so that I have everything positioned right where I want it. And so I think the pine branches will be a nice filler in the background, and then we'll put this one on top as a more of a detailed layer. And so I'll just hold that in place and add my glue. Then I've got my netting and twine. That is going to be a really good way to fill that in. And then I also brought in a couple of those gold metallic die cuts. This will really help to brighten up my arrangement. Detail. Let's put that there as well. I'm going to create the exact same cluster for this side as well. And I'm just peeling those off of my nonstick mat, and I want to first attach my flower to each of these sides. Now, if I had my project in front of me, I would know exactly the configuration and the shape that I want, but I don't have that done yet. So I'm going to wait until that time until I attach these two sections. But basically I would just lay one of the flowers over the other until I got the angle that works best for my project. Another thing you can do to add some additional detail is bring in some berry stems, and I just have a nice collection. I don't know if that'll focus because it's too high, but I've got greens and oranges and whites and all different kinds of berry stems to pull apart, and then I can add these to my project. So I think it makes sense to put one right here, and that will show from the back, just positioning that, and then I glued it right on the back part here. This is just another reason to make your arrangements off project, because you can position these exactly where you want them before you add them to your finished project. So let's put one on this side as well. That's an extra amount of detail. So once you put these into place like that, you can also add some additional stems over here. And I always try to create a balance as I'm working along. So I would probably wait until I know exactly where this arrangement is going to land before I attach this final one. But you can see, if I just kind of layer those together, you can see how beautiful and nice and full that is. And you definitely get a ready-made store-bought flower appeal to it, because we switched out the center for the paper flowers. I'm still keeping these together in my little photo boxes, so these will be ready to adhere when I get my projects finished. For the last flower, I really want to create a very shabby chic or frosted effect, so I'm going to take my Cinch and Go poinsettias, and then I'm going to add this layer of glitter snow. This is Aileen's glitter snow. I picked this up from Amazon, and this little jar has lasted quite a while. First, I want to pinch those ends so that I can get the shape, and then I'll come back around with this small brush, and I'll just lay that on. Kind of have to work it so that it isn't in a big glob at the end, but just take your time and work it around. This will take a little bit of time to set up. So I would say do this step and then move on to something else and come back to it. But you can see how I'm just adding that to the ends of the petals where it would be frosty, and gather that snow effect. So go all the way around with that, and then let that set up. And then here's the one, this one is already dried. The next layer I want to add is the stickles. And so that's why it's very important to let that set up so that you're not just smushing this glue into that wet surface here. But you want to just cover the ends, go right over top of that snow that you just added. And now you can see that not only does it look like snow, but it looks frosted as well. And then you'll have to let this layer dry before you can move on to assembling it. So for this flower, I am going to use 2 of the same size and then 1 that is smaller. And once again, it is just a lot easier to punch that hole in the center before you adhere them so that you can get down in there to the center. So you want to do this so you can run your stamens through to the back side. So here are all my layers, and I'm going to adhere them just like I did for that first red flower using my Tombow. Now, if you're working ahead like I am, you can batch cut all of these pieces and do all of these different layers or details at one time, and it goes much faster that way. So if you want to be prepared to make a lot of projects at once, this would be a really great way to do that. So now you have some options on how you want to finish the center of this, and it would be very nice to go back to those gold stamens, and the ones that are from Really Reasonable Ribbon are a little bit larger than the regular colorful stamens. So I would say 5 for the center instead of 6, and then work that down through and create your arrangement that way. So I think this looks absolutely beautiful as it is. Another thing you can consider is using more of those stems from Hobby Lobby. I just have this one here in the beautiful shades of pink. There's a couple of different sizes here, and some of them are two-tone, so you can pick ones that you think will best match. So you can just pull these off. They're really easy to take off. Just pull them here and it will come off with the string there. I have picked out the larger ones that have the two-toned on them, and I'll bring those together just like I did for the double head stamens and push those through the back. Now you can see that center matches perfectly, and then we'll just go ahead and finish that like we did for the red flower. Since I only have two, I'll just lay them flat against the back, add my hot glue, and then press my scrap paper into it and remove the excess paper. Okay, so now I have created the beautiful focal flower, and my arrangement will be going on a finish card project. So let's go ahead and bring all of those layers together. Bring back my nonstick mat here, and I have the pine branches as I did with the previous layout where I cut them and joined them back together so they would be a more compact shape. I have my twine and netting. Then I've got the Cinch and Go poinsettias that I cut from the green, and I just clipped those two together, and I was left with one, but that way they're positioned correctly. I did fold those as well. I think for the more shabby chic appeal of this arrangement, I don't want to shade those or ink them at all. I think they're pretty just as they are. So now I have two again. Here is my filler flower. I adhered those together, but I didn't finish the center because it would be covered anyway. So I don't want to waste any of my stamens. And now I've got this one. So I've got the card that I prepared to add this arrangement to, and this is one of the printables from my shop. This is the Merry Minty Winter frames, and so I just think it's very sweet. The colors are very bright and cheerful, and the images are whimsical, and so I thought it would be great to use with my beautiful frosty poinsettia. So here are the different elements that I'm bringing together, and you can see how now that's just going to fill up that corner very beautifully. Another thing you can add is some die cut or chipboard snowflakes. Those happen to be the beautiful chipboard from Rene Bouquet, or some little metallic stars to fill that in. So the first thing I want to do is add one side of my flowers. You can see that I'm using the petals on this flower to hide the center of the layering flower so that I didn't have to finish that with a stamen or a die cut. Then I'm just going to bring those together. Now remember, to shape these, you almost bring those two layering flowers together to get that angle. So this would go along here. Now if you want to put your snowflakes in, you can find a way to attach these. I think I want to do one down here as well. Let's see how that looks. I think these are absolutely so pretty. And that will fill in that arrangement. So let's just go ahead, that one for the bottom as well. You could also use some of those berry stems or some glitter stars that you die cut from glitter paper. So now that's all set. Let's go ahead and attach this to the card. And now I am so happy that I have already arranged exactly all these layers before I bring it to the card, so I know everything will fit just exactly how I want. I'm just gonna press that into place, and that will be well secured. So that's all for our flower tutorial today, and I really hope that I have inspired you to add these beautiful details to your handmade flowers. and prepare in advance for our 12 Days of Christmas in July series, which will be starting on the 12th. And so that will be next Wednesday. I want to remind everyone that we host a question of the day, and we ask a relevant holiday question every day and invite you to answer that in the comments section. It is really fun to add your answers, and it is equally fun to see what everyone else has responded. So it's a really great way to create a fun dialogue and get to know each other. And so I'm really looking forward to that. Before we go, I did want to thank Tech Cubby one last time for creating a beautiful intro for me. So you'll be able to see that next week on Wednesday at 7. And that is all. So make sure if you enjoyed this tutorial to let me know in the comments. Give me a big thumbs up for this video. If you're not already, make sure and subscribe now before the series starts, and hit the bell notification so you'll be alerted every time we add new content. And as always, I'm wishing you a happy and productive day, and I thank you so much for watching. Bye.